If you are planning for retirement, you may not realize that there are two very different ways of approaching this task. The difference is in the goals. Your goal for your retirement is to live out your dreams. It's to do all those things you've been waiting a lifetime to do, and to avoid the tragic things you've seen happen to so many others. Your goal is to not end up forced into a nursing home after a health crisis, to not end up going broke paying for long-term care, and not become a burden on your family. The professionals you work with aren't focused on the same goals as you are. There's a disconnect that leads to disaster for 70% of American retirees. What is this disconnect, and what can you do about it? In this video, elder law attorney Rajiv Nagaich answers these questions. Rajiv Nagaich originally made this presentation to the Gerontological Society of America in 2020.
My name is Rajiv Nagaich. I'm an elder law attorney practicing in the state of Washington. In keeping with this year's conference theme, Turning 75, Why Age Matters, in this presentation, we explore the issue of aging from two perspectives. One, traditional guidance professionals dispense to get consumers ready for retirement, and two, how consumers fare following this guidance. Our findings show that traditional retirement planning guidance leaves the average retiree with a 70% chance of failure in retirement, not because of lack of desire on the part of professionals to see their clients succeed, and not for the lack of planning on the part of the consumers. Rather, despite. Any endeavor that carries a 70% chance of failure should either be avoided or the reasons for the failure should be examined so as to eliminate or minimize the reasons the endeavor will fail. Now, given that aging is not something that can be avoided, the only option available then is to examine why such a significant risk of failure exists and what can be done to eliminate or minimize the risk. So let's get started. Let's start by examining retirement planning from the consumer's point of view. Now let me explain. We will start by looking at retirement through the lens of the average consumer and then explore the same issue through the eyes of professionals who help consumers with the planning needs. Now, to the average consumer, retirement is a dream one looks forward to most of our working years. After a lifetime of serving others, retirement holds out the hope of being able to do what we want to do, not what others expect us to do. That includes being able to travel, spend time with friends and family, write a book, and other fun stuff. But the deeper we go into retirement, the more we realize that we are only one health incident away from our dream turning into a nightmare. Because we watch our family members and friends, also with similar dreams about retirement, deal with the nightmares we hope will never become part of our lives. The biggest nightmares we hope to avoid? Falling ill and ending up in a nursing home, running out of money, or becoming a burden on loved ones. Now, what are the chances we will be able to avoid these nightmares? Oh, about 30%. That means there is a 70% chance that despite hoping to avoid institutional care later in life, we will not be in our own home for the final days. Now, there is a 69% chance that we will feel that we have become the burden on our loved ones we were hoping never to have become. And there is a very high likelihood that we will lose a chunk of our assets to uncovered long-term care expenses, some of us getting wiped out financially in this process. Now, to understand why this happens, we looked at many cases where people had engaged in retirement planning and how they fared with the planning to understand how dreams turn into nightmares. And over several years, we introduced changes to the planning model to see the effect the changes had. And amazingly enough, the process of a dream turning into a nightmare is a very predictable one. Here's what that looks like. As long as you're healthy, you are living your dreams. The moment you lose your health is the moment your dreams start turning into a nightmare. Why? Because we have figured out that disabled people not safe at home must surely belong in some care facility. exactly where we were hoping not to end up. This turns a health issue into a housing issue. A housing issue next becomes a financial issue. Why? Because the health insurance system covers bills for acute illnesses, but not for long-term care issues. So things like heart attack, stroke, cancer, diabetes, cholesterol, anything for which there is a medical remedy is all covered by health insurance. But Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, old age, frailty, none of those illnesses are covered in any meaningful way under the healthcare system because there is no medical intervention that can help the person with. And the cost? A few $1,000s a month to upward of $10,000 to $15,000 a month for every month one is living. It's a very expensive proposition. And if you're lucky, somebody will say, go see an elder law attorney. Despite you having your traditional legal documents in place, wills or trusts, powers of attorney, living wills, and more, because these documents do not protect assets from uncovered long-term care costs. You need to redo the legal framework to get that protection. Turning a health issue turned housing, turned financial into a legal issue. And finally, all along the way, the illness was a family affair. The moment you fall ill, all your loved ones get stuck in your life. The only question is how well prepared are they and how much time do they have for you. Let's look at this now from a professional's perspective. At the planning stages, what guidance do professionals give consumers? Let's start with health planning. What traditional health planning in America looks like is enrolling in Medicare and buying a supplement plan to gain access to health care should we fall ill. Why is this not enough? Because if the goal is to avoid institutional care and not become a burden, using the system not to fall ill would be a much better plan. An obvious gap that can be minimized or eliminated with proper planning and education. Next, let's look at traditional housing planning. Housing planning centers around catering to the consumer's hopes of being able to live out one's life at home as long as possible, but being ready to move when living at home is untenable. In other words, when I'm dealing with one of the worst days in my life because I have either fallen down and broken my hip or had a stroke and I'm paralyzed or at least compromised, take me to a place where I have no control over my life and everyone is barking down orders to me. That is not a good way to plan, but that is how 90% of us end up planning. A better way would be to help the consumer organize their lives to be able to bring the care to them when they fall ill instead of having to move to a place of care, and be able to accomplish this without running out of money or seeing our children become our unpaid caregivers. The financial planning next centers around wealth creation. If you just have enough money, life will be okay. Even though lives of people like Tim Conway and Casey Kasem clearly demonstrate that having millions of dollars will not be enough to help you avoid institutional care or become a burden on your loved ones. The real question in financial planning that is never asked is what assurance do you have that the day that you fall ill and you're no longer managing your own affairs, that your children will know how to use your money to give you a life which is in keeping with your expectations. But there is no ad that discusses that the use of money is more important than the amount of money. Protecting money and ensuring use of money are the gaps in traditional financial planning. Now, the legal planning is all about getting wills, trusts, powers of attorney, and other documents in place. They place responsibility and authority on agents, but do very little to guide them on what they are to do with the authority or how. And the family is generally just taken for granted. At the planning stages, professionals generally ignore the reality that health, housing, finances, and legal planning efforts are all interconnected. So planning ends up being fragmented, full of holes and gaps in our planning, and holes and gaps come to the surface when a crisis hits, when it is too late to do anything about it. With this understanding, we set out to develop a better planning model. That model is referred to as life planning, a single point solution where consumers can go to assess their retirement planning efforts around health, housing, finance, and legal affairs, identify the gaps that exist in their planning, review the options that are available to them to eliminate the gaps, and have the guidance towards resources that one will need to implement the plan. And our anecdotal findings are that those who engage in this multidisciplinary planning end up faring far better than those who depend on traditional fragmented planning. Now, according to a recent Transamerica study, 2/3 of retirees, 66%, say their most recent employers did nothing to help pre-retirees transition into retirement, and 16% are not even sure what their employers did. Now, 70% failure rate in any endeavor should not be an acceptable answer. It is time to relook at how we guide consumers through the retirement planning journey, and life planning is a great place to start. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. I hope you're as excited as we are about becoming a part of a change that is so badly needed.
You've just seen how powerful the disconnect is between the goals you want to achieve in your retirement and the goals professionals like financial planners, insurance agents, and estate planning attorneys have for you. If you want to avoid this disconnect, creating a life plan for retirement is the solution.